Hello everybody, we are going to build our first application. It's going to be a tutorial that shows you how to build a data model, then the layer of APIs that manipulates the data inside the data model, meaning like the instances of that data model, and then the UI to display this information visually. What the application is going to be? It's going to be a bookmark manager. We are going to build a small web browser and a way to save the bookmarks, right? Something you see in any browser. We are going to reproduce that quickly with a very simple app inside Olympe. So I created a project already, a dummy UI app that does nothing. We have an instance running here on the mobile phone and another instance running here on a separate tab in the browser. Everything's running on the community. Okay, so first things first, we are going to build a data model. So the data model is going to be named, let's say, Bookmarks. A bookmark, let's say, data model. Inside the data model, so we enter the data model editor, you have the data type. So you need to create a data type. The data type is going to be named Bookmark. There's going to be just one data type, no relation, nothing, and simple types just to show the whole sequence and how you build applications. What is a bookmark? So a bookmark is made of not text but a string. So here you have the usual search. To search or you scroll down. Here I have the string brick. I drag and drop it inside the properties. And the bookmark has an URL. It also has a name. Great. So that's it. I have it. If I go back to my project here, I can look at the instances and you see that there's no instance, but it's ready to receive the instances with the URL and name properties. Great. Okay. So I get back to my data type. And here there's a tiny drop-down menu. Also, just a quick reminder. At any time, there are the Learn the Basics, and here you have one that explains what I'm going to do, how to generate helpers. What is a helper? A helper is an API that helps you manipulate a given data type. But I won't spend time on that because I'm going to show it to you. So I'm going to resize my marketplace, so I have lots of real estate to do that work. So I have my name and URL, and here in this tiny menu, I want to generate the helpers. And that's the place where I want to save them inside the project. Yes, I want to get the properties, I want to set the properties, and I want to instantiate a new instance of that data type. The form is a piece of UI that I will not use in this tutorial. You can play with it, because we'll see that the way I want to design it is going to be slightly different. Okay, so I continue. Here it says I'm generating the set brick, then the create brick, and then the constructor. Great. And if I go back to my project, we see I have like 3 bricks now. There's this one that was there already. You didn't see it. I said I built it just to be able to set up my target instance and my other tab, but here we generated those guys. We have the create bookmark, it's a constructor, we have the get bookmarks and the set bookmarks, and each one has a documentation generated for us, auto-generated constructor. And you see you input an URL, a name, and it outputs the object you just created it. And something very important is to note here, pay attention, read the documentation, or else we make mistakes if we don't read carefully. And here it says the newly created object is not persisted. What does that mean? It means it's going to create an instance in the memory, but it's not going to be persisted in the Olympe database. Right? So we will make a quick demo about what that means. But that means that if I use that create bookmark object inside one instance like this one or the one running behind in a different tab, and I don't persist the object, that object will only exist within the instance of the application I'm running. If I want to share the data between applications, I would have to persist it, just as an example. Or if I want to close down my app and get back to it, if it's not persisted, you know, like in any app, it disappears. We're going to look at the implementation soon, but here is the get bookmark. So you pass in an instance of a bookmark and it returns the URL and a name, and the set's going to be the opposite. You input URL name and the object, obviously, because it exists already. You just want to set the values and you change the values, and here you have the output object modified. Okay, what's happening inside? If I double click on it and I see here what's going on here. So here it's all generated for you, but here you have the set object property for the URL, set object property for the name. And you see everything is encapsulated inside a transaction. It means that you start a transaction here, you do all the changes, and if there's a problem, the transaction is cancelled and nothing is committed. But if you end the transaction, all the changes in between the begin and end are committed, and the object is modified and returned here in the output. Great. Spec and dot tab, as I mentioned, filled for you with all the properties. The get, no need to have a transaction here because we just return values. We don't modify anything, so there's no need to have a transaction. I just get, and since it's a function, as soon as things are ready, it's returned. Great. By the way, it's explained in the Learn the Basics and might be the topic of a different tutorial, but something very important is to note the difference between actions and functions. It's explained here in this Learn the Basics. There is also an example, actions versus function, in the samples on the community, which are going to explain what that is. But here something to note is when you set, it's an action, and when you get, it was a function, right? Because get will return the values as soon as they are ready, but the set is really an action we want to really execute at the time the transaction ends. So that's the green box here and the green input, and triggered by the control flow. Okay, great. And now we have the constructor. Constructor is here, so what's happening inside? Oh, there's a transaction again. We could expect it, because if something fails when you build something into the memory, you really want to clean things up, and that's what's going to happen. So here the difference is, in the set we had an object passed as an input parameter. Here there's no such thing. The goal is to output that object once it's created, so we first need to create the object. Create the object also has a help. It's going to tell you it's not persisted in the database, right? It's a local instance. You need to call persist object if you want to persist it. So what's generated for you doesn't persist it. It's up to you. So if you want to modify this brick and say create and persist, you can rename it and add a persist object inside the brick, or you handle it outside, you know, following the calls to this create bookmark API. Okay, so we begin the transaction, we create the local object, the model type is bookmark, the data type we just created, we set the properties, very similar to set properties, we end the transaction, and here something interesting is we get the first object in the list, meaning like, you know, that's the list of object of instances. And we get the first one and we return it. Okay. And if there's a problem, there is an error being returned. Okay, great. So when you build your data type and generate the helpers, you get all this for free. Cool. So now we can work on the UI itself and build it. So what are we going to do? Okay, we want a small web browser. Okay, great. So URL means we want a text. And here, that's a text field. We are going to name it text URL. Great. Now I want to, we are going to use a button for that. I want a button to say add bookmark, to save the bookmark. Great. But you know, this is very, so I could remove the button here, but usually in a web browser we see that, well, we don't see it on the screen capture, but there's a star. So let's put just a star. People know what that means. And for the purpose of this demo, we don't need much explanation. We are going to resize that button and make it as round as possible. Okay, great. We are going to move that button here, and that's my URL and button to save the URL. Great. Okay. So I'm going to group those together and create a group. And that's the URL group, or yeah. Yes. Great. And here we see that, as mentioned earlier, we are going to center that group. Great. So it looks good. Okay. And we are going to make the group fill the entire width of the screen. Great. Cool. And the group will have also a horizontal layout. We looked at what those layouts are in a previous tutorial. I'm going to add some spacing. Okay. The text URL will be, let's give it a size of 80% of my group. Okay. And the button, so button, we need to name it differently. And we're going button add bookmark. Okay. And that button also will give it a width of, let's say, 15% of the group. And roughly we have that positioned properly. Okay, and if we look at here, we also have that. Because it's a percentage, it looks round on a mobile phone here a bit larger, but you know, for today it's fine. Let's not spend much more time on that. Okay, cool. So I have my group. I can move it up and down. And my layout here is going to be a vertical layout. So here it's a line on top. And below that, I want to have the list of URLs being displayed. So for that, I'm going to use an object, data grid, that can be used with the most simple way you can use it is going to be the way we use it today, but you can do way more with it, and there is a full documentation for it, right? And I recommend to read it. Today we are going to connect only the least amount of properties we need to make it run. Okay, so I'm going to drop my data grid, and it's going to import a new project, meaning like add a dependency to my current project. We are going to name it grid URLs. Great. We are going to make it the width of my screen. Great. You see here it's super small. I'm going to resize it. So here, let's see. It's going to be, let's make it 45%. Should be fine. Yeah, and you have the grid, and here you have the instantaneous feedback on the live instance. Here, great. And because there is no instance, nothing is displayed. The least we can do is connect the properties to say, I'm going to display the bookmarks. What is this? So for this, you need to connect those two properties. This is going to tell you what data type. So it's bookmark. And as soon as you connect the data type, you see it extracted by default the properties of the data type. Great, cool. you can read the documentation and see that you can modify, let's say, the headers. So here, let's say I want to capitalize that. Great. You can also change the column width, but you can take a look at the documentation and have fun with it. You have toggles like here. You can show toolbar to make fully fleshed out. You know, the closest thing you get to a spreadsheet. Okay, but here we just want the columns and the information being displayed in, which are going to be the bookmarks we are going to save. Okay, cool. I have that. Now I need to, well, it would be fun to not just enter an URL and save them. We need a feedback, so the equivalent of a browser, and we're going to do that with an iframe. The iframe is going to be here. We are going to name it, let's say, iframe web. Great. Same thing. It's centered by default because it's a vertical centered layout. But here it's full width. And here again, let's give it 45. Everything is well positioned, is well named, and everything. So what do I want to do? The first thing I would say would be to say that if I enter an URL, I want to display it in my iframe. Okay, so let's go here and listen to the interactions of the URL. I don't care about on change. I don't want to change things dynamically, but I want to enter the value when I press the enter key on the keyboard. So I'm going to handle that one. And here it's an action, and I'm going to extract the text from the URL. So it's the value, get value, and I want to set it to the frame. So here I have the property src string, and I want to set its value. And it's as simple as that. Up, and here it is. Great. So now, if I go to my instance and I type in here, let's say, something like, and I press the return key, the enter key, there you go. I have my web page. And it's fully functional. But you see that this instance is completely disconnected from this one. So here I could enter something else. Movie database. And it's going to display something completely different. Great. Two different instances. Now let's synchronize everything and make it a bit better. Okay, so I go back to my implementation. And now, when I press the Add Bookmark button, I want to persist that information. And that's going to be done in two steps. First, we generate an instance of the bookmark data type, so a new object. And as we saw, it's not persisted, and then we need to persist it. Okay? So, let's do that. I need to handle the onClick event. When I do the onClick event, I want to get the URL, right? And bookmark it. So again, I'm going to get here, get the value. Okay, great. I have the URL. I want to also get the name. How do I get the name? Well, here, let's see. There's a way to get an alert dialog to ask the end user about this. So let's try that. Let's resize things so I have more real estate. Again, the text content is going to be like, please enter the URL's name. Okay. The title is going to be Add Bookmark. Cool. The text field, which is what I'm going to ask the end user, is of type text. And that's it. Okay, great. So I'm going to ask the end user for this. Great. So now I have the URL, I have the name, and what I want to do is create a bookmark. So create bookmark is here, and well, if I want to make things look nice, let's put the name above, the URL above. So I have the URL, I have the name. On confirm, because on cancel I don't want to do anything. On cancel, I create a bookmark. As mentioned earlier, it's not persisted, it's in the memory. But even though it's in the memory, we could still access it and display it in our list, or data grid in this case. But if I select my grid, you remember I said we need to implement two properties. And we implemented the bookmark, so it knows what it needs to display, but we never said what is displayed. We know the type, but we don't know the what. And that's the function here. So I'm going to implement it. And here, something very important, and that's a break you're going to use really frequently when you deal with data, is the get object list. What is the get object list? Get object list for a given type, so here, bookmark, is a break that fetches all the instances of a given type, even if it's persisted or not, right? Doesn't, it would get the local instances and the persisted instances. The difference is if you shut down the app and restart, it's going to look only for the persisted instances because the ones in memory are going to be lost. Here I connect that, and now I can go back to my instance, web instance in this case. I can add Wikipedia, enter, save, wiki, and there you go. It's in the list. But because the grid object goes and fetches all the instances, the persisted and non-persisted, and because this one is not persisted, we see that this instance doesn't list it. So I can do the same in this one, and I say, okay, IMDb. Okay, and here I have two different instances of the same application displaying local data within their own instances, right? Okay, and by the way, if I go back to my bookmark manager and go back to my runtime data, you see that there is no instance. This shows only the persisted instances, and you see nothing happens. So what I need to do is I'm going to go back to my implementation of this button here, and what's missing is the use of the persist break. Here I'm going to persist it. It's an action again, so only when it's created I can persist it. I have the instance I want to persist. Okay, so what happened when I called the persist object? What it did is in the background it persisted the local instances that were in memory within each instance. So we see that here we got the IMDb and the Wikipedia. And what happened is if I go to my bookmark manager project and I look at the runtime data, you see it persisted them all. So I could delete them. And you see that as soon as I'm going to delete this one, it's going to disappear from the instance because everything is real time again. And it disappears from this one, and here it disappears from this one too. Okay. But that means also that if I implement my Wikipedia again, the sequence, return, displays the page, save, call it wiki, okay, it appears here on the list and here on the right instantaneously. And the same for this, return. See, I have the page. And if I persist it, it's going to be persisted in all instances and here appear in my runtime instances. So this editor is very interesting and very important because you have a way to visualize all the instances for a given data type, right? And you can also modify. Like here, I could say wiki. You have all your instances. And as we saw, we could delete instances, but you can also add new ones. So here it's made to help you test your application, possibly debug it, and also if your UI has some issues and you want to validate that the data is properly connected with your UI, I could add one here and see. Let's say I could add this guy and name it, I don't know, dictionary.com and name it dictionary. Yeah, there we go. So sometimes for this kind of real-time interaction, it might not work, so refreshing the page sometimes is needed, and you see that dictionary appears here and appears in this case also in my other instance. That's also a way to, let's say, wiki is, you can also edit your information. Same again, here we have a refreshing, and here it appears after you rename that. So very interesting, very important editor. Normally you don't generate data from within the application dynamically that way. It's really made for testing purposes. And let's just add one interaction. Here I select my grid, and if I select unselected here, if I select one item, I want to update the web and the text field where the URL is displayed. So for this, I'm going to look for my grids property, which is current selection or something like that. Yes, here it is, selected entry. You get the value. That's an object of type bookmark. Cool. Well, I want to extract the URL. So you get bookmarks attributes. Great. So I'm going to enter my object, and here I have the URL, I have the name. The name I don't care, but I'm going to need the URL. And I want to update the text field, set its value with the URL. Cool. And I want to update the frame, so I'm going to drag the frame, CS, set value, great, and the name here, and same thing. Now I need to connect the control flows for both of them, and that should work. Okay, so let's see. If I select Wikipedia, oh, not found. So I must have made a mistake. That's a perfect situation because it's like whatever I choose, it's not working. So you go back to your logic and you say, well, the text field works, but not the frame. So what happens with the frame? And you see, oh, I set the value from the name. It should be the URL. Right, I go back to my logic and I press the Wikipedia here. And there you go. It works. I have Wikipedia. I have dictionary. Cool. Excellent. And I have my IMDb. And it should work, obviously, on all instances. Wikipedia should work fine here. The scrolling works. So on the touch screen or not, it works fine on both instances. So yes, that's all I wanted to show you today. And to sum up, what did we do? We first created our data model. Inside a data type, we added the properties, we generated the helpers. Here something interesting is if I list usage, we show where this is used. We got the properties, we remember that. List usage is used once. And set bookmarks. Well, it's not used. Okay, so we could decide to keep that one or delete it. It's up to you. You know, dead code is code you need to maintain, so maybe sometimes just good to delete it. You can always regenerate it when you need it. And in the UI, we saw a vertical layout. Here we have a group which has a horizontal layout, interaction with an URL, a data grid. Data grid, again, has the most simple implementation with the model being connected and the data to fetch the instances. If those two are not connected, the data grid will just not work. So that's the bare minimum. Again, when you have a doubt, always the information list of business objects, right? And an iframe here has very simple property, the source, which is the URL of the website you want to display. So thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. You can play with it, and see you in a future tutorial. Have a nice day.